All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of What's What BR. In the hundreds now, I believe, somewhere along in there. But today we have special guests with us today. We have Paula from the Alzheimer's Association of Louisiana. How are you, Paula?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing good. As mentioned,
Good.
it's Monday, and we're just trying not to get behind schedule. That's the goal for the day. So,
Considering everything that's going on, it's good.
yep. So, so tell me, for anybody who doesn't know, get the, kind of clear the air, or is an expression that I keep hearing more people say that I can't stand, but like for a level set, kind of what is the Alzheimer's Association of Louisiana? So,
Right. So the Alzheimer's Association of Louisiana is part of a national association, and we are the only group in Louisiana that focuses on research, public policy, programming, education, and we also do fundraising. Right now, we have been the association that has led the charge for public policy to instill acts that would allow Medicare to potentially pay for this new drug, or to, in Louisiana, we just passed a bill with LDH where we are saying that Alzheimer's is now a public health issue, and working to really work with healthcare providers to help families identify Alzheimer's earlier, to provide education out in the community. As you may have seen recently in the news media, any treatment that comes along, really the goal of it is to catch Alzheimer's in its earliest stages. So we want to be able to detect it early, and we want to be able to treat it early. And so we focus on research, we focus on public policy. However, we are in the community working with patients. We have support groups. We have patient consultation where our families can call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and speak with a social worker or a clinician to really aid them on where do I go? If I don't have a diagnosis, how can I receive this diagnosis? And really, what are the resources in the community? Because we don't have a cure right now. I mean, this is the first potential treatment that's come out, but outside of that, we really don't have anything. So what are the resources for families to really manage dementia care and Alzheimer's care, which can be extremely taxing on the family?
oh no, it's I've lived it personally, and it's horrible. That's all I can say. But I do want to back up because I feel like I'm not in the loop. And you said quickly, or kind of like I thought I heard a second, then you mentioned it a second time. So you mentioned like some treatment, if there is a drug that I'm kind of banning news at this point.
Okay, hey, I feel you, believe me. My husband and I
News and social media, I'm not even touching anymore right now.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of staying away.
So a couple months back, the FDA approved a potential new treatment called aducanumab. I'm not a scientist, so I really can't comment on the efficacy of the drug. It was controversial. Many people felt like there was not enough research that really would look at what the side effects were for this drug. However, the FDA approved it. It will be available to families. It is an infusion care drug that that patients will take once a month, very similar to a chemo. And the patients, they're trying to determine what patients would qualify for this treatment. Very much like Radicava with ALS a couple of years ago. What they're looking at is mainly for patients who have or who are in the earliest stages of diagnosis. This is not a cure. It will not cure the disease. The hope and the goal is that it would prolong the symptoms over time. The key for this drug, as I mentioned earlier, is going to be detecting it earlier. That right now we are working with Medicare and other legislators to really push that this drug would be covered under Medicare, that it would be covered under private insurance, looking at who would have the capacity to offer this drug to families. And it's just one of many. We have several down the pipeline, and the goal for the Alzheimer's Association is to be able to find and offer any treatment that gives hope to families. We know it's not a be all end all, but like in cancer, diabetes, heart disease, what we're hoping and what we know is that this will lead to many other treatments. And it's really going to attract researchers to join the neurology field when they feel like now they'll have resources, that there is, promise on the horizon. And so that was one of the reasons why the FDA approved it. We supported it. And so, and now we're hearing that there are potentially a few other drugs that look promising for Alzheimer's. But we have to figure out how to detect it and treat it early.
I guess, and that's got to be probably one of the hardest parts, right? Because I wouldn't even know where to go get, like if there, I don't know if there's a test. I don't know, where to go, or is this a general practitioner thing? Is this a neurologist thing? Like, I guess that's where you guys are. That's the space, like, right. It's educating. It's hopefully, maybe we can get some of that word out now, but if you were to tell me, Brandon, you need to go either yourself or you need to go take, a family member, go get them like, I wouldn't even know where to go. I wouldn't know where to start. And I would have to go to the internet, which is the best and worst thing that happened to us, because who knows what's real, right?
Right. And I think that's where I have always been a champion of advocacy and public policy. And people ask, why is that so important? We could find a cure tomorrow, but if we don't really have that whole continuum, that wheel of care, then people are not going to be able to get it. Number one, like you just said, how do I even know if I have it? How do I detect it early? Where do I go? And there really has been a stigma, specifically in the older population of, I don't want to know. There's no cure. I want to be able to work as long as I can. I want to be able to provide for my family as long as I can. So we have seen many wait for the diagnosis. Part of what we're doing is kind of like with LDH here in the state right now, and even on the federal level, we're really bringing together physicians and medical providers and talking about where does this start? And it ultimately really starts with your healthcare provider, either your primary care physician, your internal medicine doctor. A lot of times by the time it gets to the neurologist, the symptoms have progressed. And there is testing and there are other things that you can do. But we recommend always starting and talking with your healthcare provider. Even now, people are calling and saying, well, I have a family history. What will I qualify for this drug? And we're saying, go talk to your physician. And one of the things that we really do is work with companies and other groups really to educate, especially right now during this pandemic. And you've experienced this, Brandon, is that when families are stricken with Alzheimer's, the greatest need is caregiving. And so many times families will rotate caregivers. Well, that's not possible during this pandemic. You really have one caregiver, who is providing an additional, I think we calculated like an additional 6 weeks of care a year on top of what they were already doing. And so, you are seeing that just really become exhausting for the families. And then we're seeing the disease slowly progress. And so now we're really educating to say, okay, what are the 10 signs of Alzheimer's? What are some things for brain health? We have a caregivers conference where we really talk about caregiving and what are some ways that we can aid and we could possibly help. Because as in any neurology disease right now, ALS, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, they do not have resources to really provide for caregiving. There are resources to somewhat treat the disease, but they don't have resources that really provide for that in-home caregiving. And that's a great need right now.
No, that's, as I mentioned, I lived it, I've been through it a couple of times, with family. And even though we had been through it a couple of times, things changed. Like just trying to find that in-home care, you're like, literally, where's the phone number? It's like, who do you call? And it's always turns into kind of grassroots networking. Hey, do you know somebody? Well, I got a friend, she's a nurse, maybe she can help, or they've done this. But it's inevitably what we found was, it was like, oh, the friend that's a nurse, maybe they can help. They can't, because we ran into problems where we did probably like 4 or 5 phone calls. We got a bunch of referrals. It was like the perfect candidate. And I hate to say it, but she showed up at the house and there was no way physically she would be able to help, with, the family member we had. And it was just like, I'm going to have to be there to help, so this really didn't do, all that much. And so there's so many factors that I think that people don't realize that go into play. And you do kind of feel like you're on your own, a lot of the times. And then, like you said, now with COVID, at least you could kind of deal with it and family could deal with it. And then it was like, hey, we're going to, I hate to say pass off, but like, kind of take a breather, step out.
Right.
It's not really happening, like it should or could.
No, and one of the things that I see, my husband is Dr. Kevin Kalarami, who is a neurologist here in the Baton Rouge area. And so I've been in the neurology world for a while. What we're seeing now is because of the COVID pandemic is that many families now are opting to put their family members in assisted living, memory care facilities, those types, so they can really provide that 24-hour care. We're actually dealing with that currently, personally, right now. And so, but what many families don't realize is insurance doesn't pay for that, so, and we tell families now, even when we're young, like if there is a family history or if that is something, what are my financial burdens going to be? And that's one of the important things of, like I said earlier, some people just don't want to know, like I'm going to wait and, I don't really want to know. There's no cure. And I completely understand that. However, the conversations really need to be about how am I going to maintain care and how is my family going to provide that? Is it going to be assisted living, memory care? Right now, the majority of them, they're filling up, they're full. We don't have enough memory care facilities in the state. And so our adult daycares or, respite care. And the pandemic, as you mentioned, has really kind of put that at a halt right now. And so it's like you said, really, we want to educate the families early on. And our biggest thing is you hope for the best, but you plan for the worst.
Yeah, we learned, I've told, so many people, it almost seems like I look for reasons to tell the story, but like, we had a family member that ended up going into a facility, but we didn't even look. We thought we had checked all the boxes and been through and read, at the end of the day, I don't mean to beat the insurance companies up, but their policies, and they've got to be, their businesses, they've got to make, money too. And so a lot of times it used to be, do we have a long-term care policy? But it's like, people need to go look. We got caught in a situation where it was like, made it into the facility, but unfortunately didn't last long enough in the facility for the policy to kick into play. Like it, had to be there. And so it was like, wait, it was gotchas, kind of along the way. And I equate this to, and, my advice to anybody would be, I had a brother that passed away unexpectedly. And, we were having to make decisions on the worst day of our life. These are some really tough times and you're really having to make some decisions. And if you're talking about putting, a loved one into a facility, the last thing you really want is money to be the problem, right? So it's like, plan this out on the front end, look at it and talk with everybody and see, hey, if you've got siblings, hey, if the policy does this, what are we going to do? Let's have those conversations before we have emotion tied into it at the same time. I would probably recommend for people.
And I say that, I've been a nonprofit for 20 something years and, and I've been in the health nonprofit. I was with the American Cancer Society, then ALS and then Alzheimer's. And we always, always, always encourage families. It's not a conversation you want to have. It's not something any of us want to have because you feel like, I've got a long time. Like, I don't want to talk about that. However, when you're in situations like this, where, my mother passed away very early and, we were all trying to scramble and figure things out. And thank God, her and my father had already planned that we didn't have to deal with that. And what it taught me was if we would have had to deal with that, we all had our very own strong opinions about what should be done. And none of them were in line, like none of them were. And they were all out of the kindness of each other's hearts. We wanted to do the right thing, but that was done for us. And when you start talking about Alzheimer's and like you just said, who's going to be responsible for paying, who's going to go in and check in the facility, there's so many things that kind of come into play on that. And I think the pandemic, I feel like really has really all made us really aware that we need to really be thinking about those conversations and having those conversations and doing that. And that's one of the things that we educate with one of our programs about financial health and financial planning is what are the what ifs? And if you want to stay home, what does that require? What is that going to look like as the disease progresses?
And I think it's important to note, as well for people, and I'm sure you guys know this, do it more than I do, but you can have all the intentions that you want, that you're going to be able to take care of that family member all you want. But at the end of the day, your responsibilities in life are not going to go away. And still, if it's just you're one person. You can't, it's not possible. You cannot take care of someone around the clock, yourself. You're not going to sleep at the same time they're sleeping. You're not going to be able to do it. So even if you don't have the policy and say, look, I'm going to do it, or, I'm fortunate enough to where, my spouse works and I don't have to, I'll be able to take care of them. They'll move in. We have an extra room. Like all that's all good and great, but you still can't do it alone. Like you physically can't do it. You're going to have somebody that's going to have to tag you out so you can go take a shower. You need to think through some of these things, and do you want to be in that position? Do you want some of those final memories, there where you were having to do a lot of that? And so it's a horrible disease. I've watched it firsthand too many times, and so that's why I think it's important. I'm glad you were able to come out here, and talk about it. And I don't mean to like really drag the negative, but it is horrible. But like, I want people to really understand like what they're committing to or attempting to commit to, because it's a lot more than what you think.
It is. And, I've had conversations in the past and, we've seen families. One of the things that I would always tell families in dealing with this or any other type of terminal disease, and you are the only caregiver, is that what if something happens to you? Like, I get you want to have that plan and you're going to be the sole caregiver. And what we have seen right before the pandemic and kind of into the pandemic is that we are now seeing caregivers with severe health crisis, or we're seeing caregivers pass away, just as you mentioned, from the stress, the exhaustion. I'm not really able to care for myself because I'm caring for someone round the clock. Like, you can't do both, especially when you don't have any relief in the home, as we're seeing now. And so, as you said, you have to have backup help. Like, you have to have a system. As I said, we're going through that personally. My husband is a physician and can't do it all, and really thought maybe we could. And it was like, no, we can't do it all. And so, I think us kind of stepping into that journey gave us a whole new set of eyes to look at it. And I've said to him several times, I don't understand how families do it who don't have that support or who really don't have the resources. And so that's why, knowledge is powerful. Like you said, we don't have all the treatments. We don't have the cure right now, but really educating people and trying to detect it early. And, other things too are, brain health. Like, what are we doing now to keep us healthy? What are some of the exercise, diet, those types of things, reading and studying and keeping the brain active. And so there's so much more to kind of learn about that.
And I think that's, I've got, my grandfather is, and I should say kind of like an assisted living over, in Texas. He spends a lot of time. And I've talked with, my family about it, and we've talked sometimes. It's like, man, really wish he was here. But I know, and I believe, wholeheartedly, like that's the best place. Not only is it the care, that's good for him there, but we get along, don't get me wrong, but like he's able to be there with kind of like his peers. He's able to talk. They're doing things, I'm going 100 miles an hour. I'm all day at the office. As soon as the office is done, I turn into an unpaid Uber driver, taking kids everywhere they need to go. It's, that's really where he needs to be. And he gets that activity, like you said, to stimulate, to kind of keep the conversation versus maybe just sitting in another family member's house. And that can be hard too. I think people need to prepare themselves for that. That like, hey, you might have the means, you might have the whole support system, you might have everything,
right?
But it's not the best place for them. So
I've said that to my husband when we were making decisions, and I said, if I was able to take a step back and say, you're making decisions that feel good for you. But at the end of the day, we have to make decisions that are the best for that family member. And sometimes that doesn't mean I'm going to feel good about that choice. Just like what you said, like we want to have our parent here, we want to be with them, but, she's, now in a living facility where, like you said, there are activities, she's socializing, she gets her 3 meals a day, it's constant care, and it's what's best for her. And, but that's hard. That is really hard. I don't care what disease you have, anytime you're caregiving, you really want to have them close, and you think you can do everything, and you want to be doing everything. But I had a friend who told me one time her mother had brain cancer and was terminal. And she said, Paula, at the end, we made the decision to have in-home care come in. And she said, my father was upset about it because he felt like, that is our job. And she said, I can't be her daughter and be her caregiver. Like, I just want to be her daughter and enjoy time with her and visit her. And I don't want to have to do all those other things. And I don't think mom would want me to have to do some of those things. And so it made me really think about that. Like, at the end of the day, you just want to be their daughter, their granddaughter, their grandchild, or whatever. And so how do you balance that?
No, I've always, I'd never want personally to be in a situation where, as much as my kids might want to help me, maybe it sounds bad, but like, I don't want them having to take care of me. I don't want them to have to, bathe me. I don't want them to have to do those things.
Right. That makes perfect sense. Yes.
I don't want that to be the final, memories or the last, most recent. I'd rather let someone else help with that. And if that means, whether it's in home or, at a facility, like, that's the type of stuff that families need to talk about now. Because like you said, hope for the best, plan for the worst. But that's where you guys are here, able to, doing what we're doing today, get this message out. If nobody thought about it, it's a tough conversation.
It is.
But it's like one conversation. It's like, take an hour out of your life and go eat at the best place in the world afterwards. But just like have that really hard, awkward conversation and just say, look, if these things happen, what do you want? To talk to that parent, like, where do you want this, to be, and what options do we have? I know plenty of people who they don't know, and it's weird, we're kind of moving. I'm in this, what we call the kind of sandwich generation. I've got my kids I'm taking care of. I've got, my parents that, it's kind of, we're bouncing around in there, and it's really weird sometimes to, I don't want to go to my parents and be like, hey, let's whip out the checkbook. Let's look at the finances. What have you planned for? What have you haven't? It's kind of the, the Dave Ramsey, I think he says, like the powdered butt syndrome. Like, they don't want your advice, because you're their kid. But it's like, you've got to have some of that. Like, you've got to have that question, and I think that's important because sometimes, maybe, not everybody's parent make the right decision just because they're a parent. They don't get older. I know I've got, family that just like doesn't believe in life insurance. I've got certain people who just don't believe in certain things where it's like, what, but that's really going to cause a problem. And what you're doing is going to affect other people in the family. Like, we need to make this change. And so you need to have that open conversation to where maybe the parent's not willing to do it and maybe the siblings are. If it's a long-term care, policy, and if you think you're seeing some signs, like you said, maybe get some screening, get some testing, but don't go hide it. It's not, to me, it would be nothing to be ashamed of. It's like, there's nothing you can do. You didn't go pick it. You didn't go walk down a dark alley and, contract it. It's not, anything like that. So why be ashamed of it, but let your family there be to help and say, hey, I think there might be something here, and let somebody have like, hey, do you have a long-term? No. Well, maybe we should look into that. Or, do you want to stay in a home? Do you want to go to, a facility? I make the joke all the time. My grandfather's in a facility and it's like a big dorm room. It's like he's doing college all over again and he loves it, but if you go talk to my mother, she's like, oh, it's just so bad. I wish he was here. I'm like, I just saw it 3 weeks ago. He is like the big man on campus walking around there. Like, you don't understand. It's not what you think. So.
Well, and I think it's hard to, I'm in that same generation, and, I think as a child talking to a parent, I think there is that hesitation because the parents never really want to have the children be responsible for them. Like, even as I think about it now, my daughter's older and asked, well, Mom, did you do this? Are you prepared? And I was like, don't worry about it. We got it. And we are. I think this generation that we are in now really think about long term, because inevitably we will be taking care of our parents. I mean, that's kind of the process. And when you look at healthcare and you look at the resources that are out there, it's almost inevitable. But it is important. One of the things we would always have conversations with on families when we were talking about, disease, whatever the disease was, we would say, okay, it's important for you as a family to sit down and decide for who will be the potential caregivers, whoever they are, to say, what are your deal breakers? Like, what are the things that you are absolutely not going to do? And there were things, when it was my mother, my sister handled some things, and there were some things I just couldn't do. Like, mentally, physically, it was not something I could do, but I could do all the other stuff. And so we would tag team. But we had those conversations early on. And I think that's important to, like you just said, like, what is that future going to look like? And it may not look like that down the road, but I am prepared, yeah. And, so many of my friends have younger children. My child's grown, but many of them have younger children. So their children are still in school and they're caring for parents who are aging. And yeah, I mean, I think the key is, like you said, have the conversation early on.
And I think it reminds me, it's a clip out of a little quote or a song. I don't remember exactly but needless to say, what it was, you might sit there and says, maybe, you have a trust fund, or maybe you have a wealthy spouse, but you never know which one may run out. So it's.
and I think that's the scary thing that I maybe I come across as being pessimistic sometimes, but I have seen those cases. Like, I have seen families in those situations, and we live in Louisiana also, where we don't have many resources when we look at caregivers, or, there are no resources through an insurance company that's going to pay for someone to come in the home and just care for you, personal care. If you qualify for Medicaid, there are certain programs, but just like a general insurance company, Blue Cross Blue Shield, most of those, you'll get home health, but that's only for a certain amount of time. And that's to provide services that would help you maintain some mobility, some independence. You get hospice when you're almost, at that stage, but to just have someone come in and, give a bath and do this stuff long term, the majority of the insurance companies don't pay for that. And many families aren't aware of that. Or, like, as we said, to go into a nursing home or an assisted living care facility, insurance doesn't pay for that, unless you're Medicaid. So that's coming out of your pocket, which, I never had any idea of what the costs were. And literally I was like, oh my God, like, when our families put all of these kids through college, I mean, it's like sending a child to college. I mean, except it's a little bit more.
And a lot of people don't know, we've lived some of it to where, even on that Medicaid, it might be paying for it, but you very well could be paying for it on the other end of it. A lot of people don't know that, you get a bill when that's all over with, and if you haven't planned appropriately and made, you're going to pay for that, or the estate is going to pay for that. It's not just. Right. And not that you're trying to avoid or duck bills or anything, but there's proper planning, can make things a lot easier. I can tell you, I thought one of the weirdest things that I had to experience, we ended up having some nurses, we went around the clock 24/7. And some that I'd never thought would be, once I kind of got over that we were going to have, these people in the house, I kind of knew who they were. And every now and then they'd sub someone out and I wouldn't necessarily know who it was. It's weird to wake up at like 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock in the morning and there's somebody sitting on your couch watching TV and you don't know who they are. And see, I talk a lot. And next thing you know, it's 4 o'clock in the morning. And I've been just making small talk because I felt like I needed
to entertain somebody.
to entertain them. You know, that they're in my house. And it's like, you try to go back into the bedroom and try to go, it's like, there's somebody like just sitting on my couch watching TV. I don't really know. Like, these are things like that was close to, you know, it wasn't a deal breaker for me, but it was close. It was weird. It was hard for me to get used to that, you know, but I didn't even think of that until we got into the situation. So
yeah, it's all those little things that you don't think about till you're there.
Exactly. So what can, you know, as we kind of, you know, round us around here, at the end of the day, you guys have got some resources that can answer a lot of these questions. And that's, I always tell people, especially when we're talking something along this lines, don't worry what your questions are, you know, call, hit the website, you know, set up a call with somebody, because this is, in my mind, the epitome of you don't know what you don't know. So you cannot, you know, unless you know 100%, you can answer everything. This is how this is going to happen. You checked all the boxes, and frankly, things change year to year. Like you said, y'all are on the, you know, the political side of things, you know, kind of keeping up. So some of the stuff may change, and maybe if you've got a plan, you need to just, hey, this is what we kind of thought. This is how we're going to do some things. Does this still sound feasible? So.
Yeah, and I think, you know, one of the things that for any nonprofit that you're in, you know, like nonprofit, we're a small team. You know, I have 17 members, well, including me, throughout Louisiana. We cover all of Louisiana. But the majority of the work that we do is really through our fabulous volunteers. So we're always looking for volunteers. And I know sometimes when people say that, they're like, okay, well, are you wanting me to fundraise? And yes, we do want volunteers to fundraise, but we have this great need for volunteers who want to get involved, either to be a community educator. If you want to come and work with us and provide community education programs that we already have done and canned, and you can work with community groups and provide these education programs once a month, we have slots for that throughout Louisiana. Also, public policy. You know, we've always seen, you know, where there's change is where you have voices and people making noise. And so we are always looking for people who have, like yourself, Brandon, who have lived this journey, who understand the importance, number one, of having the conversations, the importance of drugs, treatment, and the importance of resources, who, number one, want to advocate. And what does that mean? Well, maybe that means making a phone call or sending an email to your state legislators, because we have state policies that we work with. And then we also have national policies that we work with. And, you know, the national policies are really centered around the research, centered around closing gaps and disparities, making sure everyone has access to resources that are much needed, and really identifying dementia and Alzheimer's somewhat as a public health issue, because the numbers are increasing. In Louisiana alone, we have over 92,000 patients who have been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And by 2025, it'll be up to 110. Now, the key on that is those are the ones who have been diagnosed. As we mentioned earlier, we know that there are many who go undiagnosed for, you know, a much longer time. So anyone that wants to volunteer, you know, we have advocates that meet with our DC delegation. We travel to DC and speak. That's those stories and those individuals are the ones that really make the greatest impact and will make change as we move forward. And I feel like, you know, Alzheimer's is really kind of at that infancy stage, but we have so much potential, and I just see so much progress being made that it would be an exciting time for someone to get involved on the public policy side or even on the education side. And I mentioned we do education with companies where we go in and talk about Alzheimer's in the workplace. You know, most caregivers work and caregive at home. They're doing both. There's, you know, most of them are still keeping a full-time job. And so what does that look like? What can companies do to assist their employees? And we talk about brain health, we talk about stress, we talk about all of those things. So those are open to community groups, to companies. And then we have our walk here. You know, we do a walk, and we do walks throughout Louisiana, but we have one here on October 23rd. We're keeping our fingers crossed, everything's good. It's at Highland Park. And, that's another chance for our families to come out. And the funds that we raise through those events, all we do in Louisiana are walks. We do walks and we do a TLD event, but it's mainly walk. And those events allow us to keep doing what we do. But it's really about broadening the awareness of Alzheimer's and really increasing our community presence and awareness.
No, I think it's great work, that you guys are doing. It's hard work. It sounds like there's 17 of you trying to carry a whole state on the back. So
Right.
we appreciate everything y'all are doing. And if, like you said, people will just take a little bit of time, just a little bit, just to get a little bit educated, maybe even if it's nothing else, if I could, because I would be, the demographics, of the show are more than likely it's people our age, that have the parents. I'd urge everybody, whether it be a phone call, whether it be go online, do not go to social media, do not go to your friend and ask, go reach out to you guys and find out, kind of my challenge would say, hey, in the next 30 days, reach out and learn what are some of the signs to look for. I can remember with certain family of mine, I was constantly saying, you think it's really, is it Alzheimer's or is they just getting older? Like I kept every
dementia?
time.
Right.
Yeah. It's like they would keep bringing that up. They would keep like, oh, did you know such? And I'm like, but they are, X number of years old. And I'm like, really? And so for me, even it was a little bit in the beginning of kind of like, really, are we going overboard? But that would be, I'd say, maybe if anything, if anybody got out of this, take it, put it on your calendar, give yourself 30 days, if not sooner, but to go learn of when do you call your sibling and say, hey, this is, we need to go have a conversation. We need to go sit down.
And I think one of the things, and this has even been, as I work, I've been with the Alzheimer's Association since October, so coming close on a year. But even as, a granddaughter of someone who had dementia, I think what is very important to know is that, Alzheimer's is a type of dementia. There are multiple types of dementia, and they all really exhibit different signs and symptoms. And some dementias may not be Alzheimer's. And so, when we say, okay, well, I don't have Alzheimer's, but I have dementia, so maybe dementia is important. Like when we look as an association, we work with dementia and Alzheimer's. I have family members who have had dementia, but it wasn't Alzheimer's, but it was a severe case of dementia that really the signs and symptoms mimicked a lot of Alzheimer's. And so, if someone says you have dementia, that, oh, hey, well, it's not Alzheimer's, it still is important. It's important to know the type and to know that everybody exhibits it differently, and you still want to have those conversations. And I think one of the things that I've heard families say is, again, like many diseases, is getting that exact diagnosis. So I kind of know what I'm looking at. But as you said, the most important thing anyone can do is have a conversation with your healthcare provider. That's where everybody should start.
Well, we've got enough reasons to talk to healthcare providers nowadays, right? What's one more question? So.
Yeah, and I would say too, and I'm not a doctor, but as we are going through this pandemic, I'm sure you, myself, we've all felt that isolation and just kind of, I know, like my brain, I just feel like I have a brain fog since I've been home and isolated and not really doing a lot, to just really stay active. Go outside for a walk, get some exercise, make sure you're eating healthy, do crossword puzzles, read, just do things to keep the brain stimulated and to keep it moving.
There's my tip would be, because I've recently done this. It works out. It's actually kind of fun. I caught myself and our family, we were in I called it the food rut. Like we knew what we were eating. It was just what day of the week we were going to eat it. It's like, were we doing a spaghetti this night? Were we doing a chicken? I just recently made it a point to go find something I've never made before.
Right.
And
things.
Just completely different. Like I would never eat it, but I'm going to go find a recipe. And maybe that's something somebody else could, it's like find something you've never cooked, you've never eaten. You don't have you got to, I had to go get, the I had to go get it like some special Mexican cheese the other day and some special, or like all of this stuff. Like I didn't have any of it, but it turned into this whole, kind of experience. And that might be, for somebody else, hey, it's keeps your brain going a little bit because then you're now measuring things in the cups and you're moving things around. So, and it breaks it up a little bit. And if nothing else, you tried something new.
It does, and I know, like, I'll have a tendency, because I'll be on my phone, on social media, or I'll go down the TikTok, rabbit hole, and I'm looking at everything, and then I'm like, okay, my brain really is turning too much. So I never did crossword puzzles. I'm not a big reader, but started doing some reading and crossword puzzles and kind of incorporating that because it was really easy working from home. I'm just sitting in my chair all day, and then I'd start scrolling through social media. And so really trying to change that up, going for a walk outside, staying active, that kind of thing. But yeah, it's important right now. And we have seen during the pandemic that a few cases where, we were seeing that the disease was kind of accelerated during the pandemic. We attribute some of that to isolation. We've seen that with my mother-in-law where the isolation really accelerated her dementia over time. I mean, it was within a short period of time, and then now we're kind of back to that isolation thing again. So, really check on your loved ones right now, especially our older, my father, our parents and elders who are home and alone. Check on them, try to plan activities to keep them busy, and we should do the same for ourselves.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you coming. I always talk about you got more important things to do than sit around and talk to me all day. So
I enjoyed it.
I'd love to have you come back. You talked about accelerating. I'll leave us with a cliffhanger. I've got a belief that like a change in environment causes a big acceleration personally. I've noticed it from like moving from one house to another house. I've watched some of it, with family during the flood. And then just when a whole lot of stuff changes, it seems to me, at least in my experience, it's been that can escalate things. Like it just kind of, wow, we were here 2 weeks ago. Now we're here. So
we've seen
maybe
that.
we can.
Yeah, we've seen that with hurricane evacuees like Laura and others who have just really had some of these very traumatic experiences. And we've seen it with family members who move someone, like you were talking about moving your grandfather. Like, I'd like to move him here, and that sounds great. But that whole change of scenery and all of that sometimes, again, not a doctor, but can lead to kind of a change or kind of accelerating the process. So it's a great conversation to have.
Absolutely. Well, let's have some of those. Let's have you back. Let's hear how things are going. Get it a little closer so we can remind everybody about the walk. And again, I thank you for everything that you're doing. So I appreciate it. We'll talk soon.
Thank you for having me.
All righty.